Hi, we're going to be talking about podcast statistics. And so just a little bit of background on me, and then I'll let Albin talk a little bit about background on him and how we approach statistics. So I'm the technical co-founder of Buzzsprout. So I write most of the code that runs Buzzsprout, a hosting company. So we process all of the data that happens whenever anybody listens to any of your episodes. We collect that data and then present those analytics to you as the podcaster to help you improve your podcast, learn about your podcast, and do different things.
I'm the head of marketing, and so a lot of times I'm looking at what marketing trends are people chasing, what things are we doing with our podcast that affect our stats, and those stats obviously turn into someday monetization. So both of us are more on the data-driven side. We're often looking at this stuff, but we found over the years we had a pretty different way of thinking about stats than some of our podcasters. We would see people who'd go back to the stats page pretty consistently, checking in multiple times a day. And the way we were approaching stats, even when it was critical to our business, was a bit different. So Tom, what are the two ways?
Yeah.
What are the ways, types of relationships
Right.
you can have with your stats?
How many of you, you look at your statistics once a day? Just one? Okay, once a week. Good. See, I would put you in the healthy side, right? Because there's a lot of people that are not on the healthy side, right? And they're hitting refresh all day long and looking at their statistics. And so, yeah, right. Oh, I just got another download, right? And it can derail you. It's not the healthiest way to approach your statistics. So even though we are going to talk about podcast statistics, we just wanted to start with understanding the idea that you want it to be healthy, okay? At the end of the day, you didn't get into podcasting to watch a graph get bigger or to watch, numbers change. You got into it because there was something you wanted to talk about. There was something you were passionate about. There was a message that you wanted to get out to people. You wanted to connect with people. Those are the things that are really important, not numbers on a chart. So just wanted to throw that out there. So,
and no matter how unhealthy you are with your stats, you are not at the next level. We will get people to write in, my mom's in Missouri, she's on vacation, I know she listened to the podcast, but I did not see that stat come in yet. We're like, well, it's been about 2 hours, so it might have let's let it refresh a second.
And your mother lied. Yeah, she did not listen to your episode.
I like him.
That's why they don't let me write the answer support tickets. So one of the things that we want to be able to do with statistics is to ask what are real questions that we can ask? What are real things that we could learn from looking at our numbers, right? What are some healthy things that we could look at? And so one of the questions that you can ask of your stats, which is a healthy question, which is how are my episodes trending? How are my episodes trending? Am I getting better? Am I growing my audience? And what's changing in terms of trends for my podcast?
Yeah, so I'll show you some stats here. So here's some stats from one of my podcasts. And you can see these are how the episodes looked over, I don't know, this would have probably been a 6-month period. And you can see some episodes are doing really well and some were not doing as well, okay? But what we're looking for is not stressing out about any individual episode. What we're really looking at is this. What is the average?
So those are the most recent episodes, and those are older episodes.
And so we're seeing back in, a few months ago, it was pretty consistent and low. And then we started seeing some spikes that really raised that average. I could have checked these stats 300 times in this period, and we checked it a handful. And then we start looking at outliers. Whoa, there's an episode that is really small, kind of shockingly small. Here's another that did really, really well. And so then we dig in and we go, well, that's really different types of content. One was just like a recap of a conference we went to. People didn't go to the conference, didn't really care. The next one was targeting a really popular keyword. Lots of people listened.
This one, you forgot to send out the newsletter. So it wasn't included
Maybe
in the
also
newsletter.
that.
Maybe. Right?
But those are factors.
But think about it. Those are factors. And that's good information for you to know as a podcaster, because when you answer the question, does anybody even look at my newsletter? Is it worth sending out the newsletter? The stats can help you support the decision of whether or not you should keep doing your newsletter. In this case, the fact that it didn't go out dramatically decreased how many people listened to it in the first 7 days after you launched it.
Yeah, so we can actually see that when we flipped over to this other chart. This is where we saw, it had to be that newsletter. We were seeing, you see these spikes that come in. Those are when we released an episode. And so we'd see a spike in downloads. We go, okay, that makes sense. Podcast auto download, so we know people are getting it. But we came in and we were like, well, what are these? What's that bump? What are those? And that was when we sent out the Tuesday newsletter and we said, hey, here's what the episode's about. You should listen. And we started seeing, what we thought might be slightly helpful ended up being hundreds of additional downloads for our podcast that turned into long-term listens.
And so these are good trends that you can see. But notice, like, I'm not getting into, well, this was 35 downloads and the other one was 36. What happened to the one person? You know, I'm trying to figure out, there's one guy in Idaho that didn't download it. You know, like, that's not healthy. He died. Yeah, right? And instead, it's like looking at trends. How are my episodes trending compared to one another? And when you do that, you don't want to look at things like total downloads. If you notice, what we were looking at was how many downloads in the first 7 days. You could look at the first 30 days. I recommend the first 7 because that's a good measure of your reach. How many people are actively looking for your new episodes and downloading them when they come out. A good measurement of your reach for your podcast is how many people download it in the first 7 days. Did you have a question?
I think I answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. So these stats are based on live looks or downloaded looks or both?
These are going to be all downloads. So according to the way Buzzsprout sees it is we see an app or a person or a browser or something downloaded that file. And whether or not to you streamed it or you were in an app or somewhere else, to us it always looks like a download. We've got some really interesting slides later where we talk about downloads versus views versus different types of content because everybody has their own name for things and those names are very, very different.
But it's an important distinction right now, which is this information that we're looking at is coming from the Buzzsprout, the podcast hosting company. Mm-hmm. So you might host with somebody else. I've heard there's other people that do hosting. I don't know. But we all have access to the same data, right? Nobody has access to like special data. We're trying to present the data the best way that we can, but we don't know. Did they actually listen? Did they stream it? Did they download it to their device because they wanted to listen to it on their plane? We don't know that. All we know is that it was downloaded. We saw the data go out from our server for at least 60 seconds worth of data went out from our server. And at that point, we count it as a download. And that's the same for most podcast hosting companies. But that's from the host standpoint.
So Spotify pivoted to video, and I host on Buzzsprout. If I upload the video to Spotify, does that count towards downloads on Buzzsprout?
No.
Or is that a whole different feed?
Yeah. So when you're talking about video and you're talking about something like even YouTube, right? You put your video up on YouTube. We're not going to have access to that because they're not actually downloading your podcast. They're downloading the video off of YouTube.
And one of the things that Spotify does is as soon as you start uploading video, they break the connection to Buzzsprout. So they won't send that data back to us. So then
Just for that one episode.
They now will start, sometimes it seems like they actually will do it for all your episodes. So
I did it once just to see what would happen.
Yes.
I would not.
it'd be interesting for us to look at your stats after the talk and see, do we see those Spotify plays look like they go to 0? Because if it does, it's not because no one's ever listening. It might just be that they broke the connection to us.
So that first question that we just went through was, how are my episodes trending? That's a good question that you can ask of your stats and you can look at and see. Here's another one. What apps are people using to listen? Are they listening on Spotify? Are they listening on Apple Podcasts? What apps are they actually using when they listen? So this is what it looks like inside of Buzzsprout. Other hosting companies will present it in different ways. This is just the way it looks in Buzzsprout. But the question that you're asking is, what are people using when they listen to my podcast? What are they using? And so does anything stand out when you look at that?
Apple stands out. What else stands out? I mean, these are pretty different. This is from one of our shows. Most are mobile. Anything missing? We like our friend, we don't have any Spotify stats anymore.
0 Spotify stats, right?
Now, this is not scary to us. We made the decision we weren't going to be in Spotify because of some decisions they'd made in the podcasting industry. So we kept our show out. So we don't have it in there. And so that's why we don't expect to see those stats. And we also see some other things like Overcast is really overrepresented. And that would be because our target audience are going to be people who are expert podcasters like yourselves. And so you're probably the ones who are going to go download a totally separate app that's got all the customization.
But knowing that information is good for you as the podcaster because, again, you might look at yours and go, I don't have any issues with Spotify. Why don't I have any Spotify downloads? Well, you might need to make sure that they haven't jacked up your stats because you uploaded a video one time 6 months ago, and now you're not getting any downloads from Spotify. So looking at this to get an idea of how are people consuming my content, what apps are they using, it's a good question to be able to ask.
All right, another thing we can look at is where are people listening to your podcast from? So we can see where these downloads are being requested around the world, and so we can try to drill in so you can see geographic data.
Now, just to be clear, we don't really know where they're listening from. What we're doing is we're looking at the IP address. Technically, we're looking at the IP address that they used when they downloaded it. That isn't always the most accurate representation of somebody's location. And so sometimes people write in and they'll say, oh, well, it's my mom in Callahan downloaded it, but I see it in Jacksonville. Yeah, sorry. Like, that's just the way IP addresses work. Like, it's not meant to be that accurate. So again, it's good for an overall picture, but you don't want to dive too much into minutia.
So you can get a good feel for this is probably the right country. I can see this podcast is way overrepresented in the United States, a little bit in Europe, and pretty much we could do some efforts to reach out around the world.
This is so the question is, well, how is this useful? How is this useful for you as a podcaster? Well, we had a podcaster that went on the road and did a bunch of events all over the country, and it was cool for them to be able to see those cities pop up on their stats, right? So again, they can answer the question, did it help me grow my reach, this road trip that I did? Well, all these cities popped up. So yeah, I picked up new listeners. If those cities didn't pop up, you might question whether or not it was worth it to, pack up the RV and do the road trip.
One of my favorite stories around this is from Botter, his podcast Shortbox. They went through Europe and they're just stopping at all of these little comic book shops. And so they'd ask, hey, can we drop off some business cards? And they knew they didn't have any listeners in Belgium, but then they went to Belgium or something and they leave them there. And then they said years later, they started seeing little pockets pop up in some of these cities and they go, I know what marketing I did that actually impacted those numbers.
So that is a question that you can ask of your stats that's actionable. It gives you some information you can use.
Does it make sense when we say actionable? The idea is we're not just stressed looking at these stats. We're asking real questions that can inform decisions we're going to make later.
So we'll have people that will ask for, crazy stats. And so my question would be, well, what would you do with that information? You know what I mean? Well, I just think it would be cool. Yeah, I think it'd be cool too, but it's a distraction from creating valuable content, which is what your listeners want. They don't want you looking at cool numbers. They want you building valuable content. So we, as a podcast hosting company, that's one of our value propositions to you guys as podcasters is to sift through and give you the information that we think is usable. It's actionable. It's something you can actually improve your podcast with. Okay, so this is a question that stats can answer. Do people really listen to my podcasts? Haven't you ever asked that question? Do people really listen? I see these downloads, I see these numbers, but do people really listen? And so the bad news is we can't tell you. Buzzsprout can't tell you. Like we said earlier, all we know is that the file got downloaded, right? Your podcast hosting company can only tell you that it got downloaded, but we don't know were they streaming it, were they listening to it, or did they download it to listen to it on a plane? But you know what? They never actually listened to it. We don't know that. But there are people that do know that. And so that's where you're going to want to go. Make sure that you have set up your accounts with Apple and Spotify who share that information with you. If you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, you can use Apple Podcast Connect, Spotify Podcaster Dashboard to be able to see how much they consume of your content.
So you could maybe see 50 downloads over here on Apple Podcasts, and then you actually click into Apple Podcasts and see those 50 downloads turned into 40 people who really click play and listen to this episode.
And don't obsess over trying to reconcile those numbers. They're not ever going to reconcile. They're apples and oranges, okay? So
Apples and Spotify's.
Apples and Spotify. Apples and Spotify. Yeah. This is a great report. So Alvin, walk them through like how you would use this as a podcaster.
All right, so this is one of our coworkers' podcasts, and she went on, and from one episode, she had 264 people who actually listened to this episode on Apple Podcasts. And she can see how far they played into that episode. So it's not just they downloaded it. It's not just that they click play. She can see of the people who click play, they on average listen to 89%. We've had episodes that because it was just really dense, people listened multiple times. So we got over 100% consumption. People are listening all the way through and going back.
And you see anything here? See the little dip? What do you think happened there?
People lost interest.
They
There we
skip.
It starts off, so this is a podcast about helping you fall asleep. So all the ads are crammed into the beginning. And so you get in, you're getting into bed, it says, oh, BetterHelp, help me with my, and you go skip, skip, skip. And then you're like, all right, now we're going to bed.
Yeah, and so that's represented here in the engagement because you can see that little dip at the beginning. And you can also see people start to drop off at the end. This is good information for you because you might find what segments of my show do listeners skip over, right? Obviously, they're going to skip over ads, right? But maybe you've got different sections that people don't listen to. That will bear out in the engagement.
One of the stats I love here is this engaged listeners. So what this is going to tell you is these are people who listen to at least 20 minutes or 40, or I think maybe 40 or 80% of the episode. These are people who are really, they're not just clicking play, they're sticking with the episode. And so I like tracking this over time. Is that number going up over time? Are people not just downloading, they're not just feeling like I should listen to this. Instead, this is one of their favorite shows.
This number is huge. This is what podcasters need to understand, especially in a world where YouTube is trying to dominate podcasting and saying, oh, we're the best podcasting platform, and you need to put all of your effort into making sure that you're creating YouTube videos. Take a look at this consumption. 89% consumption on a 48-minute episode. That's a lot of consumption. On average, the listeners are actually engaged for 48 minutes. That is something that you as a podcaster should know about your podcast for different platforms.
So when someone's clicking play on this, they're listening to like 44 minutes on average. This is kind of the similar graph that you'd see in Spotify. Again,
So that was Apple. We were looking at the Apple Podcast Connect information. Now this is the same episode in Spotify.
and we've got that same kind of wild cutout because of the ads right there in the beginning. Tom, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so 49% completion. So notice there's a difference between Spotify and Apple, right? On Apple, on average, they listen to more of the content, right? Don't know why. Could be the nature of the listeners on the different platforms. But it's information that's good. It's good. It's useful for you to know where your most engaged users are.
All right, so keep these numbers in mind.
Yeah.
People almost finishing all the episode. These same episodes live on YouTube as well.
I just wanted to say we were talking about the difference between YouTube and Apple, Spotify. We're talking about two intentions that are different. When you go to YouTube, you're watching something, and people underestimate the value of an audio-only podcast because not everybody consumes podcasts by looking at the screen. Sometimes they're engaged in other activities, and we underestimate the value of the connection that we've made and the relationship we have. That these people listen while they're doing other things, and the intimacy and the continued
Did you read our slides?
Because this is where we're going.
This is
I'm sorry, I'm ADHD and I'm all about getting ahead of people.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
But the point that he just made is illustrated in this diagram. So this is the same episode.
Average percent viewed. The same episode, 5.4%. What do we see?
2 minutes and 38 seconds. Average view duration.
Not 44, because the intention is different. People are not sitting there watching podcasts on YouTube the same way that we consume them on our phones. When they're on our phones, it's because we're driving down JTB and we're in traffic. We're on there because we're mowing the lawn. We're doing something. We're at the gym. We're focused and we're doing something else. And podcasting is the only media that is okay with you doing something else. Everything else is like, I need you locked in 100%, focused on me. And that's what YouTube wants. It's what Netflix wants. It's what TikTok wants. It's what Instagram wants. Everybody wants 100% of your attention. And podcasting, it knows you have a life.
And one other thing along those lines, I like you use the word intimacy. There is an intimacy that is formed between an audio podcaster and an audio listener. I don't understand it. There is something different about it, right? Like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but you go up and you talk to listeners and they feel like they know you, right? To the point where it can be a little bit unsettling, right? Because there's this intimacy that's formed of them having you in their ears while they're doing something else and they're listening. And it's just different than video engagement. It's just not the same. Another thing related to that, does anybody here do a video podcast? Okay. How much effort does it require to do video versus audio?
I'm considering dropping it at this point.
I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that you should know this number. You should know this number because it takes 10 times the effort and you get 5%, 2 minutes of listening versus 89% consumption on your audio.
So we have turned our radio show basically into a podcast. We're at a radio station who has some pretty antiquated, equipment. They can't really tell us who's listening at 8:30 on a Thursday. But and we just added a video element of it, thinking that hey, maybe we reach out on Instagram, reach out on YouTube, we could build viewership. But it's like we get more response, like you said, from the people who actually listen or call in on the radio.
There's something different about audio. Okay, so here's the thing. You can make an objection. You could say, Tom, these numbers are jacked because this is a podcast that people listen to when they go to sleep, and it wasn't made for video. So people didn't like it. That's why they didn't listen to it.
Or there's
okay?
no video component.
Yeah, there was no video component. You added video afterwards. Okay, so Buzzsprout went all in on video. We went all, like, as a company, we create several podcasts. And so Alvin was like, we got to do it right. 3 cameras, script. We're doing a video podcast. So this is one of those episodes.
And so we have the exact same piece of content that I created as a blog. I've created the same content as a podcast. I've created the same podcast as shorts, and we created as video. Here's the video. This one might have like 1 million views, hundreds of thousands of views. So it did really, really well. Average percentage viewed, though, was 23%. This is a very, very good YouTube video for us, and we're really happy with it. 3 minutes.
I like that he's talking about his own video and saying it's very
Well, I'm not talking about the content. I'm just saying as far as video goes, I was really happy with it.
It was a video first piece of content, right? It wasn't something that we just slapped a video on, right, of just showing him behind a microphone recording it. It was something that we were intentionally building for the video platform.
So 3 minutes, 23% viewed, same piece of content released as a podcast. Average consumption was 94%. So people were sticking through it and actually consuming it. I don't think we have the blog on here as well, but that was something like people were reading for 7 minutes. And so we were thinking they're probably getting most of the content, but I think that's where the intimacy comes from. 7 minutes versus 3 minutes versus over here, it's like 18, 19 minutes of engagement with the same content.
So now we could talk about video for a long time. I just wanted to make that one point that as a podcaster, you should be aware of what your engagement is on different platforms, especially if you're doing video, because video can suck the life out of a podcaster. Okay, so you should know how much consumption is happening so that you can evaluate how much you want to invest in it, right? But I don't want to we've only got so much time, so we need to move on to other questions that we can ask of our statistics. So there's a question, it's like, what else can I learn about my listeners, right? What else can I learn from the data that's available to me, okay? And so one of the things that you can do is you can look at age demographics. Now, age demographics I put in the category of creepy.
It is weird. You just go and you watch a video, you listen to some audio, and there's somebody else who's combing through all of that data. The way all this data is collected is that you have a profile across everything you do on the web, and then someone says, hey, we've got this phone. Here's some of the characteristics about the phone. They go, we know whose phone that is. So we'll tell you what info we have about this person. So you share back and forth. When we looked at doing this and adding stats in, we're like, this just feels so gross. So
and here's what you need to
you
know
can
as
get it from Spotify.
podcasters. You can get this information. This is coming from Spotify. Why? Because Spotify is doing creepy things. Okay, but you could look at it, right? It's there. But I would strongly suggest that you not say it on your podcast because people might go,
They feel targeted.
yeah, how do you know how old I am? How do you know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that you can't look at the data. I'm saying it's a little creepy and you should probably not mention it to your listeners because you don't know how they're going to respond. People are starting to catch up with what's happening in terms of data collection on their behalf. And so just be careful with how you use those stats.
Doesn't it really depend on who your target audience is? Because wouldn't you want to know that this certain age group is watching it?
So it's often really nice for advertisers. So
Not to you, listen.
You're right.
Right.
Your listeners don't want to know that you know how old they are, right? Your advertisers want to know that. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying you can look at the data. I just wouldn't suggest telling your listeners that you're looking at that data. Now, if you really want that data and you want to do it in a non-creepy way, I got a great way to do it. Freaking ask them.
Right. Tell
Ask them. Hey,
comment below.
yeah,
where you're
there,
listening.
or I've created a survey. If you love the content, if you love this the podcast content I'm creating, click on the link and fill out my survey. Tell me who you are. I want to know about you. That's so much better than I looked up your IP address and I know your shopping history at Amazon. And okay, so this is information, age demographics. It's good information. It's just in the category of creepy. Same thing with gender, right? You can get this information from Spotify. It's not bad information. It's just a little creepy. Spotify impressions. This is a statistic that they started offering up more recently that I also think is really good because it gives you a good idea of are people that when they see my album artwork, when they see my episode title, is it compelling enough for them to click on it and actually listen? Because Spotify is showing you how many impressions they gave you, and then you can see how many of those resulted in actual click-throughs to turn into listens.
I think a lot of this actually came out of TikTok because TikTok showed they always show the biggest number, how many views there are. We all know those views are on average about 1.2 seconds long. And those numbers just got so big, everyone compared them to YouTube, they compared them to everywhere else. And then you start seeing every platform start add view data. So we're seeing more things like impressions, but this is one area where it is nice to know, oh, I'm actually getting featured quite often, but it's not turning into clicks, or you're seeing it does turn into clicks.
And so it's a good way to tweak your artwork, tweak your titles to be able to see, can I get better click-throughs? Okay, how do my numbers compare, right? Like comparison in general isn't such a great idea, okay? But there are some things that you can answer by looking at your comparison. So one thing that we do with Buzzsprout is we share all of the statistics across all of our podcasts every month. So if you go to buzzsprout.com/stats, we share stats across everybody. So you can see that 34% for this month, 34% of the downloads came from Spotify. You might get, let's say, 55% Spotify. Okay, that means that you are disproportionately getting Spotify downloads. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just good information for you to know that a lot of your podcasters are listening on Spotify. Same thing might be true for Apple podcasts. That based on everybody else, how do you compare? And it might lead to some actionable things that you could do in terms of promotion. If you find like Albin was talking about Overcast. Overcast is a great platform to listen to podcasts. If you find that you've got people that are listening on Overcast, you might want to do an Overcast ad because those are your people. Disproportionately, those people like your episodes. Let's run some ads and drive some traffic.
And I'm always hunting to see where are the zeros. Castbox, we've got 2.2%. That's a real percentage of the podcasting industry. If your podcast has 0, let's go make sure you're listed on Castbox. Go through the list and see how far down do I have to go before I see something that's not showing up at all, and make sure my podcast is available.
Web browser, how many people are listening on my podcast website? So you can kind of compare across all of the Buzzsprout podcasts. About 8.7% of the downloads are happening through a web browser. They're actually on the website listening to it.
So we have a customer who is down. Do you guys know what the Villages is? Okay. So the Villages are like a retirement community, kind of a famously wild retirement community. They're in Orlando, and
Lots of podcasts about the villages.
he does a podcast about what's going on in the village and all the drama. And web browser is like 75% because they're on AOL and they're logging in and they're listening to what's happening and they're driving around their golf carts.
Okay, if you see across all of the downloads on Buzzsprout, you can see that it is disproportionately in the United States, right? So 45% of the downloads that happened in that particular month came from the US. So it's still predominantly in the US. So you might have a podcast that's geared towards a different country. And you might find that your numbers are much bigger, but man, my downloads are, they don't compare to so-and-so's numbers, right? It sucks to compare, but at the same time, it's disproportional how many people listen in the US than whatever country you might be dealing with.
All right, so this next one, we're going to show you what the average podcaster is getting for downloads on their shows.
This is my favorite.
So in the first 7 days, before you click it,
Whoa.
all right, well now you know.
No.
I love it because when I ask people, all right, the average podcaster in the first 7 days when they release an episode, how many downloads is that going to get? And
Right.
most people come back with an answer that's up in the thousands if they didn't already see that slide. They think it's big because all the podcasts you know about are really big podcasts. You probably listen to mostly famous podcasts.
So I did not want to put this number on our website. When we were originally doing the statistic, we were talking about like what statistics should we share with audiences? And I was like, man, I hate the idea that people would be comparing themselves to other podcasts to determine success. Because it happens all the time. People will email into support and they're like, is my podcast successful? Like they're legitimately like, they share it all the time in our Facebook group. Here are my numbers. Is that good? Right? They're asking this question and you just want to say, man, you didn't get into it for the numbers and don't get. But when we actually ran the numbers, I was like, dang, this is actually encouraging. What this is telling you is that if you get 112 downloads, when you launch an episode, if you get 112 downloads in the first 7 days, you're in the top 25% of all the Buzzsprout podcasts. Think about that. If you get 29, you're in the top 50% of all of the podcasts across Buzzsprout. That's encouraging. It should be encouraging. That's why we share the numbers. Like, well, actually, this is really encouraging for people to know, hey, in the first 7 days, which I told you, I think is a good measurement for the reach of your podcast. Like these are attainable numbers. And then notice it gets, crazy as you get up there. But even the top 1%, 4,700. In the first 7 days of an episode's downloads, 4,700 downloads.
One thing I love when we talk about 29, people will say, I'm quitting, I'm not doing it, I'm only getting 50 downloads, it doesn't make sense anymore. But look around the room. What do we have? Like 35, 40 people? This is about an average podcast. If you're invited to come speak in front of people every week, you would come speak to this group. This group, honestly, the engagement's about the same, like 80% for what you'd get with a podcast. So when I see those numbers, I don't think those are, I like to think of it 29. That's actually a really good number.
All right, real quickly, only a couple more here. Episode duration. This is a real common question. How long should my episodes be? Okay. The correct answer to that question is, how long can you not be boring? Right?
Thanks.
That's the answer to the question. I don't care about these statistics.
Right.
We share these statistics, but how long can you not be boring? That's how long your episode should be.
Yeah.
You should not hesitate to cut an episode short if it sucks or if it starts to just, kind of drag on. Cut it short. Nobody's going to complain, right? But what you don't want to do is say, well, it's got to be 22 minutes long because statistically that's going to put us right in the 15 to 32%. No, man. People want to listen. I listened to a 6-hour podcast. 6 hours. It was one of the best podcast episodes I've ever listened to. It was incredible content. I will listen for 6 hours to that content. But there's other ones that I would not listen to for 6 minutes. Okay? So all that to say, we do share these numbers. I just would use it very loosely.
This is another nice stat that we have. You can see how often people are publishing. So up at the top, those are pretty much daily podcasts. Coming down weekly, bi-weekly, and more. Again, we're not trying to be prescriptive. You shouldn't look at this and go, well, I've got to do a podcast every 1 to 2 weeks based on the data. That's just what other people are doing for your show and the type of content it is. Daily may be the right answer, or maybe one a month when I can put together an awesome episode is the real answer.
And remember, all of these stats are available at buzzsprout.com/stats. You can always go look at those numbers. And that is it.
Blythe, how much longer do we have?
Blythe, how long do we have?
All right, we got 5 minutes. Do we have any questions?
So I noticed a trend with your stats that I've seen with my own, which is I've broken into most countries except South America, just like won't budge on me. Have you seen on your end any podcasts that in Spanish that they do better? Because I'm trying to figure out if it's a language issue.
100%.
I have other countries that don't speak English, but maybe they speak more English if they're doing it. So I'll try to figure out what's keeping me from South America.
Spanish-speaking podcasts we see way better, obviously, in Spanish-speaking countries, but also Spotify ends up being predominantly where they listen. So I just look at, make sure you're available, and there's all sorts of kind of cool tools now where you can clone your own voice and translate it into another language. So you could always launch a second podcast in Spanish.
That's a lot. That sounds like.
I'm curious. I've been podcasting since 2017.
Let's go.
So I feel like things have shifted. Thank you. I feel like things have shifted in the way that I don't want to say podcast algorithm, even though it's technically like a thing. In your stats that you've seen, because I started off with Buzzsprout, have you seen a shift of folks who've been doing it that long and how those stats have shifted and changed with I guess you could say the new age, the podcast world that's happening now?
The apps are totally different.
Yeah.
So Spotify didn't have podcasts till 2016,
Right.
and so it's all Apple. And there were a couple other third-party apps. Now, obviously, you're getting pulled from Spotify, but also YouTube and Amazon. There's lots of new apps all the time. So we're seeing it be much more diverse and where people are listening. Around the world, it's becoming more common for other countries to listen to podcasts. What other trends have you seen?
I guess what I'm thinking is how are these stats being measured differently than maybe when they were back at that time?
More accurate.
Okay.
So Tom can tell you the more that we identify bots, we identify abusive behavior, people downloading millions of episodes every day. When we cut those off, we're never cutting off real listeners, we're cutting off bots. And so sometimes the numbers do go down. Unfortunately, as we get more accurate, it always ends up being a smaller number.
I had a question about the newsletter and surveys or whatever. I don't know about everybody else, but I just feel like I'm inundated with that. So I'm beginning to question how effective is that? Or if you send it out, should it be a teaser for the episode as opposed to a full-blown newsletter?
The newsletter makes a lot of sense for us because we have tons of customers on a email list already. And so they're used to reading emails from us and we say, hey, you want to learn about all the stuff, but also we talked about something on a podcast you may enjoy. Here, go listen to it. So that makes sense. But would I build an additional email list to be able to email the same people I already have on the podcast? No. I would instead be thinking, what areas can I market to a new audience? So for you, that may be, I want to get in front of people on Instagram because I think that's where the people who listen to my podcast hang out.
All right, hey, we've got to cut it.
I'm sorry, you actually have 5 extra.
Yeah, you
Oh,
saw
we have 5 extra
We
minutes.
got to 2:15.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, but the point I was making though is
You got
that
6 minutes. Back 2 minutes.
it's like everybody has gone to some type of event or whatever, and they've told them to put out a newsletter. So you get 50 requests for a newsletter or 50 requests to do, at least I do.
I mean, I get the newsletter. I also get people say, you got to do social media. And they tell you got to be on LinkedIn all the time. And they tell you got to do everything.
Got to start a
And-
TikTok channel.
And you got to do a new blog.
And
You gotta make sure you got 3 times. You gotta read it 3 times.
And then by the time you've done any of that, you are totally burned out. And you do one episode ever. And you kind of got it onto YouTube, but you weren't happy with it and you never did anything again. The best marketing channel is when you can find out who is your audience and only show up for them. Don't spend all your time. I personally hate LinkedIn. So I don't want to go to LinkedIn.
I like LinkedIn.
So I'm not going to go over there and spend all my time trying to reach people because I'm going to really dislike it. But if you really enjoy TikTok or you enjoy Twitter or whatever it may be, go spend time there. If your audience is there, it's better to invest in one channel well than to kind of spread yourself thin. So,
All right, let's take another one.
How do you guys measure engagement?
We don't. engagement is measured by Apple, the stats that we showed you.
Yeah.
The only people that can tell you engagement are the actual players, right? So Apple can tell you on Apple Podcast, and Spotify can tell you within the Spotify player. They can tell you engagement. Was there a question back there?
Are you able to track SEO, search engine optimization, say if your niche is in products? And no, because on YouTube I know SEO, it's driven by the words that you say, and you can track that stuff.
I would do that at the website level. So if you have a podcast website, you can see I'm starting to get a bunch of people landing on this page from Google, but we wouldn't show that as much for the people who click play. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I just see, all right, we're getting a lot of people coming to my website, and then see where they're coming from.
All right, second question, what do you charge?
For Buzzsprout, $19 a month.
Should have led with that.
The other question? All right, last question, everybody.
So you're on another distribution or another host platform. How difficult is it to transition from that and not lose any content or subscribers to go over to Buzzsprout?
The best thing about podcasting is you have so many options. If you are on video, you're on YouTube. You really are. If you're doing video online, you're on YouTube. If you're doing almost everything locks you into one area. Podcasts, you can move in about 15 minutes from Buzzsprout to any number of places and then move it back the next day. So 15 minutes, we can even track, you can put in all your stats, so we have all that data kept for you as well. But it's relatively easy, and we'd love to help you if you want to.
Yeah, and I think everybody got in their welcome kit. There's like 3 months free. If you're looking for a host, you can go sign up, follow the link. It's got a little promo code, and it'll give you 3 months for free. But you can also, you can just create the account and play with it. It'll say, do you already have a podcast? You say yes, and it'll pull over your last couple episodes and show you what it looks like inside of Buzzsprout. So you can check out all the tools that we provide, and then it'll walk you through if you actually want to move over. It'll walk you through it. And we have a support team. We have an incredible support team. Priscilla, who's speaking right now downstairs. But we'll be here. We're going to be at the meetup tonight as well. So please ask any questions that you want. I really appreciate you guys being here.